Hello and welcome to GREENFLEET Talks. My name is Kate Armitage and I'm your host for our discussion today, and I'm delighted to be joined by Mike Strahlman, Director of EV at Just Park. Hi Mike.
Hi Kate, great to be here.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Today, Mike, we're discussing the transition to electric. Just Park is pioneering peer-to-peer parking and EV charging. Can you tell me a little bit more about your role at Just Park?
So thanks, Kate. As you said, I'm Director of EV at Just Park. In the context of Just Park, I'm responsible for all of our EV products. So we have a B2C product, which is sort of like the Airbnb of charging, called Just Charge. It's a community charging platform. It provides a proxy driveway for those who don't have a driveway at home, who want to park and charge and guarantee that charge. We also have a B2B product, which is called Fleet Charge, which is taking this proxy driveway concept and transferring it to drivers of a fleet who don't have a driveway at home, who need that guaranteed charge to go about their business.
Mike, I'm sold already. I am indeed a user of peer-to-peer charging, and we'll come back to that later in our discussion. Before we do, the EV transition is not necessarily straightforward, and there are challenges. So we're going to have a look at some of those challenges. And I'm going to start with something that has been evident for at least 12 months, which is this issue with vehicle supply and the long waiting times that some fleets are reporting. This is having an impact on them running their existing vehicles. What problems have you seen arising from that? And when do you think that issue will be resolved?
This is a tricky one, right? I mean, it's an externality. It's something that we can't control. And of course, the primary outcome of these long waiting times is that, generally speaking, in the market, there's a risk of meeting the targets for a business, for the country, for the fleet. If we zoom in a little bit more, this causes the existing burden on existing infrastructure to get worse. So in 2017, there were around 5-to-1 cars per charger in the UK. And as it stands now, it's about 15-to-1. And that includes, of course, passenger vehicles and everyone going about their day. So as this delay in vehicle supply is amplified, we'll find that the existing charging network infrastructure will continue to be burdened as it stands by the number of vehicles on the road and an increasing challenge there. And then I think it would be remiss for me not to say that rising energy prices and the cost of living crisis adds weight to this kind of existing inertia that fleets have in making the transition. And so if there's a vehicle that's not available and things are getting more expensive, why would I switch? Is the question that fleets would be asking themselves. And so we actually know in our business and fleets that we're talking to that there are companies that are postponing the electrification decision based on infrastructure, let alone availability or costs increasing.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
It absolutely does. And actually, I think you've raised a really valid point, that because we've got these long delays from ordering the vehicle to delivery, sometimes as much as 18 months, I've heard reported, there's a little bit of an opportunity for buyer's remorse, as you've said, with the rising cost of electricity. Actually, the business case at the point where you place the order, by the time the vehicle arrives, is going to be looking slightly different. So there is a, potential a nasty aftertaste that's going to arise as a result of this lag. If you
and Kate, I realized you asked me, how do I see this issue resolving? And I realized I didn't answer you. In my mind, infrastructure solutions need to get smarter in the meantime, not just more prolific chargers, or more public chargers, but actually different types of solutions in the landscape need to come to the fore in order to solve this problem in the meantime. So that's alternative use cases, alternative types of chargers that help support this burden and allow folks to use and engage with the infrastructure in a smarter way.
Absolutely. Well, let's dive into that a little bit, Mike, because it used to be, I've worked in e-mobility since 2010. Just Park has been around for 15 years. So, but it used to be when you talked about switching to electric vehicle, everyone said, what about the range? What about the range of the vehicles? And that seems to be changing because the batteries have got better, because the range has got better. That anxiety has now been replaced with charging anxiety and the ease and convenience of charging, particularly on the public network. So what kind of solutions are you talking about that would potentially ease the pressure on the public charging network?
On this particular topic, I always like to bring up sort of the statistics about how people charge. If you think about the number of vehicles on the road today, there are about 500,000 EVs on the road today, which is wonderful. Around 90% of those EVs have a dedicated home charger or a workplace charger. By contrast, if you look at the population of the UK, only around 50% of the population would be able to have a charger on their home driveway, which means that if you zoom out, there's an impending challenge in converting the rest of the population to be able to have this primary use case of charging at home. So it's not going to be as easy or convenient to use the public charging infrastructure as it would ever be in charging at home. So the question you're asking is, well, what solutions are in place to be more innovative to actually support this? And when I talk about proxy driveway or proxy charger, I'm thinking about the Just Charge solution at Just Park or our Fleet Charge solution as two examples of providing a quasi home charger for a driver who doesn't have their home charger. The impact of this is that the driver won't have to depend on the public charging network solely or exclusively for their charging needs. So that reduces that burden on public charging infrastructure, but also offers an alternative use case to what is prevalent in the market. And I think for me, one of the biggest challenges here is that folks don't know or aren't aware of these alternative use cases to public charging, because they're always likening in their minds charging their vehicle should be the same as I fuel my petrol or diesel vehicle. But actually, if you think about it, in the myriad of solutions out there, there are alternatives. And one of such alternatives is charging at home or quasi-home.
Yeah, and there is absolutely no doubt at all that if you're talking about ease and convenience, charging your vehicle overnight when you're not using it, ideally on your own driveway, or if not a neighbour's driveway with their consent, is probably the most straightforward and guaranteed in terms of reliability and guaranteed in terms of availability, which are again key concerns, I think, for fleets.
This is really important, and I like to speak to the numbers. If I like to speak to the numbers, if you take engagement with the public charging network, again, it's not the same as fueling your petrol or diesel car. 7 minutes to fuel your car. The best case scenario is that you spend about 45 minutes, but potentially up to an hour and a half charging your vehicle in a public charging scenario. That's time out of the working day or that time out of your personal life in order to make that happen. And for a fleet, and as someone who uses their vehicle as their source of income, that's then money out of their pocket in engaging with the ecosystem. Over and above this, unfortunately, the existing public charging network and infrastructure has its foibles, as I would say. If that's waiting time, if that's chargers not in the right place, if that's charger reliability or those being broken or potentially different connection types. And what we find in our data and our research is that fleets spend an average of 16 hours per month per driver engaging with the ecosystem over and above the charging time. And that 16 hours is an opportunity cost. It's value out of that business. And so again, if you have a home charger or a proxy home charger, all of that time or the majority of that time goes back to the driver, goes back to the business, and ultimately back into the value of the fleet.
And that's such an interesting statistic, that 16 hours a month. And, that has to cut, if we're going to see the mass take up of electric vehicles within fleets, that 16 hours a month has to come down, because that's a big burden.
Absolutely.
Interesting. Very interesting, Mike. I always have to ask about fleets that have not yet started the electrification journey. Whilst we're seeing a lot more fleets beginning this, there are still fleets who are waiting for the right time for them. What advice do you have for fleets who have not yet begun this process in terms of beginning the transition?
This is another really interesting question, because we encounter this a lot in our engagement with fleets, but also in sort of the public forum. This is something that's discussed a lot in asking for people who are at that leading edge of making that decision. You know, what do they do? What do they need to think about? I mentioned earlier that 50% of the UK population doesn't have access to a driveway at home. Well, our numbers show that for fleet drivers, that number increases to 75%. And so the number one thing a fleet can be doing in thinking about the transition is think about the demographics of your fleet. Understand who has the ability to charge at home and who doesn't, in order to create this bingo card of solutions that will provide for the fleet. The second thing would be then try to remember and visualize that there isn't a silver bullet for the charging solutions that are out there. In particular, when you're thinking about what's the easiest thing to do, the easiest thing to do might be to provide chargers for that 25% who have home driveways.
Yeah.
But how do you then cater for the rest of the population? There won't be one single solution for that. Which leads me to my third recommendation, which is don't forget about the 75%. Just because it's easy to deal with the 25% who have driveways at home, it doesn't mean that it's sustainable or applicable for the whole fleet. And not just pushing our own product here, Fleet Charge, which provides a solution for that. It's more thinking about, again, the landscape of solutions which provide an alternative for drivers who can't charge at home. And Fleet Charge being one of them, which is that we can provide you a proxy driveway for that driver so that they can quasi-charge at home. But equally, not everyone's going to be able to deploy that solution for those drivers. And so you need to think about the combination of solutions which allow for the easiest transition possible, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does make sense. And I hear this when I talk to fleets who have started this journey already. I hear this a lot. 25% is an admirable starting target. You know, don't do nothing because you can't work out what to do with the 75%. You know, if you can, in the next few years, transfer 25% of your fleet vehicle drivers to electric, that is a great start. Now, some of the early movers are getting much closer to 50% penetration of electric vehicles, and they are finding it harder because there is no silver bullet. And as we get closer to 2030, there's really going to be some hard graft going on to kind of find solutions for the not low, the hard to reach fruit, if that's
Yeah, and you know, I guess complementing what you said there, I think that one of the challenges that I've seen in speaking to fleets at the beginning of their journey is a little bit of hand waving around. We'll deal with the easy 25%, and we'll figure out the rest later, because infrastructure will improve, and you know, local government will deploy solutions for us, and things will get smarter, and all these wonderful aspirations. You know, not to be too pessimistic here, and there is a silver lining to what I'm going to say. I don't think those challenges will all be alleviated if we just wait. And so I think that it would be remiss for a company to be only making decisions for that 25%. I guess I'm underlining that point I was making earlier.
Yeah.
So what do we need to do? Well, actually, that fleet needs to think a little bit more concretely about what to do about the remainder of the population and try to accelerate dealing with that and learning about that now rather than waiting, and test and experiment with the solutions that are out there in the market, be that Fleet Charge, be that other solutions that are out there.
Yeah.
And so what I really love about the ecosystem is that a lot of these things are complementary. And so practicing having a complementary set of solutions is the way that we'll solve the longer term problem.
Yeah, we definitely need a wider toolkit. And we mustn't overlook human behavior either. The employees have a say in this. And you may have 25% of your employees who have off-road parking, great, but they may not all be prepared to have a charge point installed. They may not all be prepared to have their van on their driveway because they want their own car on their driveway, for example. And similarly, you may have other drivers in that 75% who are pioneers and are prepared to test new solutions and put that planning time in. So it's we definitely need to think wide about solving this. No silver bullet. It's a great message. Mike, we've touched on vans already, but I'm just gonna give vans the final word, if you like. The latest statistics that have come from New Automotive showed that new van sales in July, electric vans made up just 5%, and diesel is still 93%. So vans are clearly not on the same trajectory as passenger vehicles at the moment. What are their particular challenges with vans, and how can they be overcome?
I mean, aside from supply of vehicles, of course, our research is showing that the main challenge that drivers face is van drivers face is having dependable charging with minimal downtime. And I guess I keep harping on about drivers without driveways, but it can't be underestimated how big a change this is from diesel just having on tap, dependable fueling with minimal downtime. So the question is, how does one solve for this in a way that allows that A, anxiety, but B, realistic interpretation of the foibles of the public charging ecosystem, alleviate that challenge? And again, for us, it's thinking about how we provide a solution that confers all of the benefits of having a home charging ecosystem to those who don't have a home charging ecosystem. So if I may, our Fleet Charge product, which provides a proxy driveway experience, we find a driveway within a 15-minute walk of a driver's house that we dedicate to that driver or a group of drivers so that they can book and guarantee and depend on that charge. And so these kind of 2 points about dependable charging, i.e. isn't broken, or they don't have to wait, or they don't have to search or find for it, and then a guarantee, which means minimal downtime and more earnable time of their day, those concerns are alleviated, if that makes sense.
It does indeed, and I think you've hit the nail on the head in terms of that convenience and reliability. Mike, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for.
Thanks for having me, Kate. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome. I would like to say thank you to Just Park for joining GREENFLEET Talks, and thank you for watching. Please tune in to GF365 again soon.